Good afternoon to you all.
Good
I
afternoon,
think
sir.
we can start. Yeah, I know we can start the class. So welcome back after the Salah holidays. Okay, so we're going to continue our course by looking at globalization and public policy. And as we all know, the world today has become a global village. And because the world is a global village, it means that virtually nation states are naked. There is no country that can say that it is completely you know uh, protected from outside influence or the influence of other countries or even the influence of the environment, because several other things have contributed in promoting globalization, apart from technology, apart from the fact that you have international organizations. You also have environmental factors that sometimes transcend borders, and such can affect a country, even if the country has created some form of protection for itself. So therefore, we look at the first sub theme there, because we are already familiar with what public policy is, because I've just taken some time to say that a public policy is what government decides to do or not to do. So any policy, a government can decide to do, take a policy to solve the problems of education, the problems of health, transportation, economy, finance, defense, all sorts of poverty. You can have all sorts of policies, made, to address most of these challenges in society. Now, the first sub theme there is for us to look at the impact of globalization on policy making. How has globalization affected policy making? And globalization, we say, refers to the increasing interconnectedness and interdependence of the world's economies, societies, and political systems through trade, technology, migration, and information exchange. So, say globalization refers to the increasing interconnectedness and interdependence of the world's economies. The world's economies are interconnected and interdependent. The world's societies are interconnected and interdependent. The world's political systems are interconnected and interdependent through trade, through technology, migration, and information exchange. So all this actually affect. Now we look at some of the key impacts on policy making. How has globalization affected policy making? We look at the first issue is the erosion of state sovereignty. The erosion, so to say, either you can say removal of state sovereignty, because we know that in the past we used to say that one of the characteristics of the state is sovereignty, that it can make laws and implement those laws within its own boundaries without taking any form of instructions from outside forces. That is what makes a state sovereign. But today that sovereignty is being removed, okay, by the fact that globalization limits the capacity of states to independently formulate policies, especially in economic and financial sectors. As we see every day, the economy is able either to grow because of favorable conditions outside its own control, or it is stagnated or even depreciates because of the unfavorable condition that is outside its own control. And so we continue to see, for instance, the country battling with economic crisis, with financial instability. For instance, you look at the rate of the dollar and the naira. Every day you hear the naira is sliding, and the dollar is, getting stronger and stronger as a currency of exchange, that is globally used. That is in spite of all the gang ups against the dollar. It doesn't appear as if it has worked in really bringing down the value of the dollar. So every Nigeria is struggling to defend the naira by paying and making sure that the demand for dollars in the market is being catered for. That's to say that they don't have any serious stress in terms of those who want to import one thing or the other, want to pay for certain services or the other. They're able to do that by going to the banks, and so they've been able to maintain a very slim, differential between the official market and what they call the black market in terms of the dollar, even though it keeps sliding. But then that is because the economy is an internationally determined, phenomenon. There's nothing that any country can do to prevent its own economy from outside influence. It will be stimulated either by, internal factors or by external factors. And it can also be stagnated by internal or external factors. So, it's something that can be vice versa. So, example is structural adjustment programs that were imposed by the IMF and the World Bank in the 1980s. It reduced the autonomy of many African states. And that is why you find up to date, except countries that are able to understand, where they are coming from and where they want to head to, you find that a lot of African countries don't tend to understand what has happened to them and why they have remained where they are and what they need to do in order to break away from most of the backwardness, dependence on international foreign organizations and all that. And so therefore you find that the structural adjustment program has virtually destroyed the economies of most African countries because they bought the ideas of, that government has no business in business. And so therefore what did they do? They now started, privatizing most of their publicly owned enterprises. And in Nigeria, most of these enterprises have been privatized. And that is why we are. Meanwhile, some other countries have run state enterprises and they have been very successful in running state enterprises. Countries like China that have state-owned enterprises and they send them overseas as, businesses that have thrived, they have succeeded. So you have secondly is the adoption of international norms and standards. You see, because we're talking about how does globalization, how does it impact policy making? You find that countries are pressured to adopt global norms. And what are some of these global norms? Like human rights. They are expected to promote, the rights of citizens, like issues about environmental protection, issues about labor laws, and then governance in terms of whether your government is going to be transparent, is going to be, having any form of integrity, or whether the government is able to provide, the good life for the majority of the citizens. Example is the adoption of the Paris Agreement on climate change, influencing national environmental policies, and so that people continue to now think of environmentally friendly policies. So most of the policies you want to make must be environment friendly. You don't make policies that are going to continue to create problems within the environment. And that's why I find a lot of countries are making laws, virtually banning the use of, leather bags. All this, we use a lot of it to produce pure water, to do, so a lot of plastic and semi-plastic materials are being banned in several countries because they are not degradable and they pollute the environment, creating all sorts of environmental hazards and environmental problems. Apart from that, you also have the issue of pollution, which has also affected the atmosphere, and therefore people now, the quality of air that is being inhaled in and out by human beings is of very low quality, which is also causing a lot of problems. for citizens. So when we talk about, for instance, we talk about adoption of international norms and standards. And when you talk about human rights, for example, if you talk about human rights, for example, which is a key global norm, in human rights, some of the global norms in human rights actually refer to the widely accepted principles, standards, and practices that guide the protection and promotion of fundamental rights and freedom worldwide. So these norms are primarily codified in international human rights instruments and promoted by global institutions such as the United Nations, the Amnesty International, and several other groups that are championing, the rights, of citizens. Include, for instance, in Nigeria, you have the Berkete family. They are doing a lot in promoting the rights of citizens. So some of these rights are, of course, the right to life, liberty, and security, equality and non-discrimination, freedom of expression and information, freedom of religion and belief, political participation, right to education, right to work and fair conditions, right to health, rights of women and girls, rights of children, rights of minorities and indigenous peoples, freedom from torture and cruel treatment, enforcement and monitoring mechanisms. Because the enforcement and monitoring mechanisms of all these human rights are the United Nations Human Rights Council, universal periodic review of how human rights are being treated, United Nations treaty bodies such as CEDAW committee and then CRC committee. Then you have also the International Criminal Court, where for crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide are actually being tried. Individuals who participated in killing people just for no just reason. Like you find that in Nigeria, it has virtually been converted to a killing field. Every day, every week, what you hear is stories of people being killed, waylaid and killed in their respective villages. So these are some of the things. We also talk about adoption of international norms. And Nigeria, for instance, is a signatory to most of these international norms. And, so it is expected that they should obey and respect the rights of citizens. But unfortunately, you will find the security agencies have not purged themselves of respecting the rights of citizens. That people have right to express themselves. In Nigeria today, once you say anything contrary to what the government wants to hear, you have actually been declared a persona non grata by the security agencies. And that is not the way to deepen democracy. It's not the way to go. You don't continue to use primitive ways of silencing people and then expect that the society can develop. No society develops through that, through this means of, and by policy, even if they are going to make a policy, it is expected that there should be some element of reflection on what they are saying. For instance, you find Idris Abdul Karim, just the latest, sang a song in which he was telling Sheikh Tinubu to tell his papa, because in Nigeria, when you say somebody's papa, it means his father. That people are suffering. Immediately, one of the organizations, I think broadcasting something organization, now came out with a circular banning that song from being played. Look at the way the first lady handled the issue of when she went to a nursing school and they sang the song and the people refused to accept her as their mother. And she agreed that they have the right to express themselves and that at any rate, she cannot be imposed on anybody as his mother. It's people who accept her as mother that she will be grateful to be their mother, not people who are not willing, and that they should not be punished, neither should they be sanctioned, but the institution want to take steps to sanction them. And these are not the things that promote development. And yet we are signatories to respecting the rights of people. Freedom of expression. People have the right to express themselves. And if they have done something that is not right, what you need to do, you don't start banning things. You go to court. Tell the person to court. Go and try your so-called laws. Go to the court. Take him. He's not a criminal. So you can just put up a case in the court that this person, this song you think should not be, then you go ahead and go and defend why you think the song should not be accepted. Not all those draconian laws that they made, to gag people under the National Broadcasting Commission. I think such things is not going to help, to promote development, and they are also violating the policy that they have made. So Nigeria is a signatory to accepting that people have the right to express themselves, and that should be allowed. We cannot now be turning Nigeria to Idi Amin's Uganda when he was saying that freedom before speech is guaranteed. The freedom after speech cannot be guaranteed. I think both should be guaranteed. Freedom before and after should be guaranteed. People should be free to express themselves. You have also influence of international financial institutions, which is what is killing us, particularly for instance in Nigeria. Policy conditionalities from institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO significantly shape national policy directions. For countries that have accepted to remain, we say, for example, Nigeria's fuel subsidy removal in response to IMF recommendations. And even the IMF themselves said that it will take about 15 years or so for Nigeria to get out of that, which means you need about how many tenure for the APC? More than it is 15 years, almost 6 tenures of APC for us to be able to see the benefits of removal of fuel subsidy. That means that it is not a good policy. But we know there are better ways of handling some of these matters. As we have seen with Burkina Faso, with Mali, and with Niger. All they did was to expel all these whites, and they now try to pay off whatever debts they have, but they then decided to also nationalize most of the companies that were mining their resources and paying them peanuts for such mining activities. That is what Nigeria is not able to do. Nigeria doesn't have the courage to take decisive decisions. Damn the IMF, but it's fine that the IMF has influence on the public policies that we make. And we see that for countries like Nigeria have been dancing to the IMF tune, they have to now go ahead, for instance, to remove subsidy, which has put people into all sorts of suffering. And in addition to the suffering, you also have the problem of insecurity. People their lives are not secure. They cannot, be guaranteed if they are traveling from one point to another that they can reach their destination successfully. So these things are being compounded also by the economic crisis, that people cannot feed themselves because of the hunger and starvation that is going on within the society. But that is simply because the country has adopted the IMF and have also implemented some of the recommendations of the IMF. So they are working directly under the supervision. And such a political dependence, I think, is what is required to be broken, in most African countries, so that they can have direction. The D is growth of non-state actors in policy making. NGOs, multinational corporations, and global advocacy networks now play crucial roles in influencing national policy. Example is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the influence on health policy in many African countries. They have decided that, Africa is overpopulated with over 1.something billion people, that there is a need to reduce population, that the world is overpopulated with about 8 billion people. There is a need to reduce the population of the world by 50%, which means 4 billion people have to go. And where are they fixing their eyes on? Africa, because they feel that Africans are completely useless, have no use whatsoever. And so therefore they feel they should just terminate the lives of these Africans. And so they come up with all sorts of policies and programs by even ensuring that our food is no longer, we can't guarantee even the source of our food in the very near future. Even the seedlings to plant on the African soil will need to be imported from banks that were established by some of these, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and all those international bodies that are bent on destroying the continent. But a lot of African leaders are asleep. They don't understand what is happening because they have some temporary benefits. And they think that in the long run, these benefits are nothing, because your generations will not even live to see what you have stolen from the people in terms of, all this wealth that people are gathering that is of no value and of no use. And so therefore we found that such international the growth of some of these non-state actors influence policy making. Take, for instance, even the terrorism that is going on in some parts of Nigeria. That has influenced policy making in Nigeria. If you look at the budget, because the budget itself is a policy document. The budget, you see, the spendings, for instance, for security has drastically increased. So you can say that insecurity has also created increase, in security funding. And then you find that the other aspect of the funding, the non-kinetics that should have also been funded by the government, is not receiving the kind of funding that is desired to be received. And because we are not also sincere in our fight against the terrorists, that is why they continue to create new fronts in which they are attacking Nigerians and killing them, turning the country into a field where all you hear about is the cries of people that are being killed on a daily basis, or being kidnapped and kept in the bush and flogged and maltreated simply because they happen to be citizens of Nigeria. But this is a point that influences policy making, the growth of non-state actors, including, of course, the terrorists, because they are also non-state actors. Apart from international NGOs, multinational corporations, also have this group that are also really not. They have cross-border policy challenges. These cross-border policy challenges, issues such as pandemics, climate change, terrorism, and migration require collaborative international responses. Example is COVID-19 pandemic forced global coordination on health policy and vaccine distribution, because when we talk about cross-border policy challenges, of course, we should be able to understand that these pandemics, we have Lassa fever, even though it has not become a pandemic. We also have this one that has been killing people silently, even though it has not also become global. But sometimes it does have that tendency. And then you have the COVID-19 itself that created a lot of panic, and lots of lives were lost in the course of that. Then you have climate change, which has also its own effects. You see a lot of erosion, flooding, earthquakes, all sorts of things happening because the environment is reacting, to the way human beings have been using it. So you have all sorts of, reactions going on. Then terrorism, of course, some of the terrorists are having some links, with some international terrorist groups. Then we also talk about migration. Migration requires collaborative international responses, particularly the illegal immigrants that we have, illegal migration. A lot of people have been washed away on the Mediterranean Sea because of their attempt to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. They end up dying. Several thousands on a daily basis are being killed, on the Mediterranean Sea because of their desire to cross over to Europe, where they believe it is an El Dorado, that their life there will be easier, and you will have a lot of milk and honey, in that country. So you have such challenges, around the world that require collaborative responses. There's no way you can solve the problem of illegal migration. For instance, even recently I saw the very dark man. He went to, I think, is it Cote d'Ivoire or somewhere, or Ivory Coast, to check of some of these girls that have been illegally, sent into prostitution in that country. Small girls of 14 years, 15 years are being kidnapped and then taken through illegal routes and processed, Burkina Faso, into Mali, into all those French-speaking countries without their consent. And this in itself requires some very collaborative efforts by the Diaspora Commission, the Commission for Migrants, and all those people, for them to come together and find ways to rescue some of these unfortunate citizens that have been taken against their will into sex slavery. Okay, so you have also policies. Most of these activities happening within the world affect, no country is living in isolation. Every country is being affected. So the globalization is real and it is virtually affecting everything. Then we look at transnational governance. Transnational governance. Now, transnational governance refers to systems and processes of rule making, implementation, and enforcement that span across national borders and involve multiple actors beyond traditional governments. Okay, because now beyond the government, you can have all sorts of meetings going on. Even sometimes the government of the day may not be aware that such meetings are taking place. So you have the characteristics of such. The characteristics is a multi-actor involvement. It includes international organizations, private corporations, NGOs, and civil society. Multi-level governance operates across global, regional, national, and local levels. Then we have norm setting and regulatory frameworks. Often focuses, that is the global governance, often focuses on standards and protocols rather than laws. Examples of transnational governance mechanisms include the United Nations systems. It sets global development goals. For instance, the SDGs were set between 2015 and they expire by 2030. So we're just about 5 years away from the expiration of the Sustainable Development Goals. Then you have the World Trade Organization. It regulates trade policies across nations. Trade policies. Okay. For instance, you find United States, for instance, increasing tariffs against goods coming from some countries. And then those countries also have retaliated by also imposing tariffs on goods coming from America. And then even Canada has even threatened that they will even stop supplying electricity, to the United States. So you have all sorts of retaliations. What I'm not too sure of is whether the World Trade Organization has been mediating and how far has their mediation gone, because it appears as if the United States is behaving as if it cannot be regulated by anybody. And so they've withdrawn themselves from most of these institutions, international institutions. They have global internet governance led by the ICANN, involving multiple stakeholders. Global internet governance, because how do you protect data of individuals? How do you protect it from being used by illegal, sources, or people are not expected to have such information? Then you have financial regulation. The Basel Accords regulate banking standards globally, and that is why, so that I can have trade can go on smoothly. You can buy goods and pay for such goods using the banking system. You don't need to travel, and even if you travel, your money can be in the bank, so you can withdraw from one place to another. So it promotes very smooth, financial, transactions because of these financial regulations, that have been enshrined. Now, what are some of the benefits of this global transnational governance mechanism? Some of the benefits are it promotes global cooperation, and that's why you find countries cooperating with each other in order to, facilitate the well-being of virtually all countries and all nations. Then you also have, it addresses issues beyond national capacities. There are instances or issues that may go beyond your own capacity that can be addressed by these international organizations. For instance, if you talk about, recently you saw Senator Natasha, who was suspended, even though unconstitutionally suspended for 6 months. Constitution provides for 14 days. But in Nigeria, you have some people who think that the laws they make are superior to, despite the fact that even in several judgments in the courts, these suspensions have been set aside. But we tend to have people who just believe that, they must exercise their own madness when it is their own turn. And so deal with a senator that was going to challenge one of the powerful politicians in Nigeria, the number 3 man. The senator was suspended for 6 months. She ran to the International Parliamentary Union to present her case. She didn't stop there. Went again, I think, to United Nations to present her case. This will tell you that, beyond national capacities, if you say you don't have the capacity to solve your problems, people can report to you outside your own country. And decisions can be taken. Some of the decisions will be to ban you from traveling to some of these countries. And anytime you travel to any of those countries, that you should be deported back or arrested and tried for suppression or whatever it is that you be charged, by some of these international organizations. And that is why some presidents cannot leave their country, because if they leave, they will be arrested for crimes of genocide and some other, crimes that are, they've committed, in their own country. Then also you have another benefit. It encourages policy innovation and knowledge sharing. So that when you want to make a policy, don't forget that even what we now have as the pension scheme, that pension scheme started from Mexico. This new pension scheme that went and borrowed, it started from Mexico. Even America borrowed from Mexico. So it's not as if you cannot start something that later can have some kind of global application. The Grameen Bank started in Bangladesh. This idea of people not having collateral and then they can borrow money started from Bangladesh. Now it has been replicated in several. So when you look at what is happening globally, you see that this global governance mechanism, this transnational governance mechanism, allows for some kind of knowledge, sharing and innovation. So you can, but the criticisms against it is that it has democratic deficit, it lack of accountability and transparency. For instance, some of the actions taken by United Nations, who will hold the United Nations accountable? Who will hold the human rights? For instance, you find human rights organizations, when the Nigerian army decides to go and attack terrorists, or even treat terrorists the same way they are treating Nigerians, by slaughtering them. The Nigerian army also say, okay, fine, since they were slaughtering people, let's also slaughter them. Amnesty International will now come out and say that Nigerian army is violating the rights of the terrorists. What sort of logic is that? When these terrorists were killing Nigerians, you didn't say what they are doing is wrong. Now that Nigerian army is trying to stop them, you say what the Nigerian army is doing is wrong. Then you have also Western dominance in global institutions. There's a lot of Western dominance, and this is the problem we have really in most of these African societies. We are not able to understand that, look, it is not everything that is Western that we must adopt that will work for us. No. We can also develop our own unique system. And that is why for me, 100%, as long as the president of Burkina Faso has not changed from what he's doing, from all the people-centered policies that he has made, all the policies are people-centered, from housing to farming to pension to everything I can think about is people-centered. What he's looking at is his people should benefit from the resources of our country. And that is why now in Nigeria we are giving students loan. In Burkina Faso they are paying them monthly about $120 to be in school, to be in university. In our own case, we are willing to give them loans to go and pay school fees, because our parents want to steal not just present resources, but even resources of the future. Because some of the resources that they are even mortgaging, for instance, you hear that if the oil well has been discovered, it's already been, they collect in advance the money for that oil well, which means that they are mortgaging the future and compromising the future of generations yet unborn. So we cannot just continue this Western model because of their dominance in global institutions. There's the need for us. That is why when ECOWAS, instead of ECOWAS to understand that Mali, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso are trying to, regain their independence from this French colonialism, they now say they are going to fight them, that they must go back under French colonialism. And they say, no, we're not going back. We are going to secure our independence. Now they secure our independence. They may suffer initially because of the sanctions that have been imposed on them. But sanctions also is a way of awakening people to know that their destinies lies in their own hands. And as long as their leaders are not stealing from them, they have the tendency to develop their country and make their country better. While people who are living under this Western deceptive democracy that they call will continue to live in illusions. They have weak enforcement mechanisms. Now you said somebody has committed genocide. How do you arrest him? You are not saying if he's seen anywhere, he should be arrested. By who? So you have weak enforcement mechanism for some of the things you are saying. And then how do you take them to trial? How do you take them to take them to trial? This becomes some of the problems. Then we look at policy diffusion and transfers. Because well, the main topic we should not forget is globalization, impact of globalization on policy making. So how do we now go about policy diffusion and transfers? Policy diffusion refers to the process through which policy ideas and programs spread across countries or regions. Policy transfer refers to the specific borrowing of replication of policies from one context to another context. And I mentioned to you, for instance, the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh started this idea of giving people loan without collateral. Those who don't have collateral, how can they get loan? And they came up with a policy of why don't they form a group of 10 and let this group insure one person, then one person is given a loan among the 10. When he repays back, another person within the 10. I was temporarily thrown out. I was making the point that when you take the Grameen Bank example in Bangladesh, what they did, Dr. Mohammed Yunus Mohammed, I think one of the early, he actually came up with that idea. That idea has been replicated in several countries. So we're talking about policy diffusion. That's what we're talking about. Transferring policy from one context to another. He applied this policy on poor women in rural areas. And so it is people who are poor are the ones that this policy was meant for. And he succeeded in really getting that bank working. The same policy was brought into Nigeria. And the policy was doing very well under the People's Bank, led by then late Tai Solarin. And when it was taken into some kind of analysis, when some research was done on the prepayment rate of the loans collected, it was discovered that women had about 99% success in repayment rate than men. Because a lot of men, when they collected that loan, and having the kind of mentality that they have, and because there were not enough mechanism put in place to check the usage for the funds, some of them decided to go and marry more wives. And then the way it was implemented in Bangladesh was not the same way it was implemented, in Nigeria. And that is why this context, the issue of context becomes very, very critical when you are looking at, some of these policies, whether the policy, because it was one of these scholars in public administration, I've forgotten the name now, but I will remember it and I will let you know, that said that Fredericks had argued that you cannot take an institution that has grown from a different environment and plant it in a different context and expect it to produce the same result as the context from which it was coming from, because the contexts are not different contexts. Bangladesh, Nigeria, two different contexts. And while it was very successful in Bangladesh, Nigeria, it was successful with the women, but the men misused that opportunity. Now, what are the mechanisms of policy diffusion? The first mechanism is learning. Government observe and learn from others' policy experiences. For instance, when Nigeria wanted to solve this problem of poverty, because they say poverty, we had moved from 87 million people that were under poverty to 133 million that we will now say are under multidimensional poverty. And that number will have increased now to about 180 something million, because with the introduction of this fuel subsidy removal, everybody's life was turned upside down, inside out, and people now face real suffering. And there are people that are facing the problem of just feeding themselves. They cannot feed themselves. They have no food to eat. And in the past they could feed themselves, but now they cannot, because prices of goods and services in the market has gone up, courtesy of the removal of fuel subsidy. So when they were going to land, they look at China. China was having this problem of poverty. They had over 800 million people out of their 1.4 billion people that were living in poverty. So they decided 40 years plus now that they are going to change that scenario, and with consistency in policy and with real implementation to get this problem behind them, they were able to now open a national register, which Nigeria also did. They have a national register of poor people. In China, they also tried to look at the location where these poor people are living, and they now decided what Nigeria did after now identify where these poor people are living. They rather went for conditional cash transfer. China didn't go for any such thing. What they did was to, send over 300,000, civil servants to go and live with the poor people in the rural areas. So all of them are posted out to go and live. And not just for 1 week or for 1 month or for 1 year, for between 2 to 3 years, they will live with them. And then as they are living with them, they will now be meeting with people until they are able to figure out a sustainable path to development. That when the people are assisted, they can assist them once, but they should be able to find their way and sustain their means of livelihood. And I think it was in 2020, last year, 2024, we had the privilege of going to, around March, I think it was almost around just about a year now, we went to visit a village of fishermen. For them, they wanted to show us how they transform their own communities. So we went to this fishermen's village, and they showed us how they transformed these fishermen from people fishing and relying on nature for fish to people now who are producing the fish by themselves by creating hundreds of thousands of tons for them, and now assisting them with the fish, fingerlings, giving them also the feeds, and then when they now produce their first set of grown up that are ready table size for sales, government bought it from them, which means government has supported them 100%. And what did the government do? These people were living on their ship, on their boats. On that boat, that's where they cook, that's where they eat, that's where they sleep. So government now decided to build one room for each of the fishermen family. Since they are already used to living in one room, because they consider the boat as just one room. So they built one room for them and relocated all the fishermen, to this one room. Then the houses were built in such a way that they are solid foundation for upstairs. So you can build up to 50-story building from that one room they give you. So at the time we went to the same fishermen's village, because it was only the one room that was given to them free. But the subsequent buildings on top of the one room was constructed by the fishermen themselves. So right now, as I speak with you, last year when they were on their second floor, each person was on the second floor, which means they have built additional 2 floors from the first floor. So now they have 3 rooms. So the first floor, they can now convert it to be maybe their living room. Then they have their bedroom. Second floor, third floor is their bedroom. And they will continue to build like that because they have been settled. And their turnover as of last year, when it was about 86 billion, this RMB, Chinese yuan, which means they're able to now grow an economy. Because for the Chinese, you don't move from local government chairman to state governor until they look at what is the per capita income when you came in as the governor. Have you increased it? Which means, because if you increase the per capita income, that simply means that the standard of living of the people employment generation, all that will have also been will have also increased. And that is what they use to judge performance, not this thing we do. Somebody has been governor for 8 years. You don't know what is the unemployment rate when he came in. How many people have now been taken out of the unemployment market in that particular state? Nobody knows about it. All these things are rocket science. And yet we talk about development. How many industries have they created that is employing people, that is converting raw materials produced within those environments into finished products? Nobody's talking about that. And you talk about capitalism. You talk about we just continue to remain as a dependent capitalist country without any form of progress, being made. So learning is a very important. When you learn and you learn correctly, don't just learn things wrongly and you want to experiment. Second is emulation. Policies are adopted to appear modern or legitimate. Your policies must be made in such a way that they appear modern or they are legitimate. Then tell this competition. Countries adopt similar policies to attract investment. So for instance, if we say you are going capitalist like we have done in Nigeria, we say we're a pure capitalist country, we want to be capitalist, we don't want any form of government enterprises and all that. We have sold everything. And they are not performing. And we're not doing anything to ensure that, either we turn them back to government or we resell them, because now you have sold and you have not given them targets. This is what they are producing as at this time. Now that it's going to your private hand, you must increase it. If you cannot increase it, we are going to take it back. There should have been some conditions that allow you, when somebody has collected a company is not performing, you should take it over and get a better buyer, somebody that can bet. It doesn't hold you to ransom. For instance, you have sold a electricity company, distribution. So who is to generate? You say you continue to generate. Why don't you privatize the generation itself? So that people can come in. We have all sorts of potential sources of energy that are available to us, but we have been kept back by backward thinking and backward individuals. These individuals have nothing to offer the country. They have coercion. Policies are imposed through conditions by international organizations. Most of the policies that they introduce are given with some condition. We are going to give you this. If you introduce this policy, we will support you with. For instance, I was listening to Ndumi, who was accusing the president of bias and all this, and he was reading out figures in terms of the loans or support that has been received so far. It's after removal of fuel subsidy. This is what IMF itself gave the federal government $800 million to support the removal of fuel subsidy. So what have they done to support the removal of fuel subsidy? Apart from the CNG, stations that they are creating more in the south than in the north. You don't find these CNG sources in the north; they are not there, but they are being created in the south. And then, at any rate, most of these vehicles have been, built for petrol engines. Then you now want to convert it to be using gas, and that's why I find a lot of gas explosions. Some of these vehicles just kept exploding with the people inside, which means it was not really a well-tested and accepted policy. Then types of policy transfer. There are different types of policy transfer. We have Dolowitz and March 2000 have given us about 4 different types of policy transfer. That you have voluntary transfer based on learning or emulation. So you can voluntarily transfer a policy. You have seen the policy working. For instance, nobody has forced us to adapt this new pension scheme. We saw it being, experimented in Mexico, adopted by United States, and then we thought it was a good practice. We now brought to Nigeria. This pension scheme now has garnered a lot of trillions, of funds into its own coffers. And the government now is confused as to what to do. They say they want to use the money, to construct roads, build infrastructure. If they will build infrastructure and recover the pension funds, that would be a very good development. But we know that in Nigeria, they are not good in policy implementation. They don't plan their projects properly from beginning to finish. How long will it take you? What are the likely delays? All these things are supposed to be planned so that you know the date you are starting and the date you are completing, so that you don't collect people's money and then at the end of the day, you can't account for it simply because you're a government. Government is not about irresponsibility, or it's not just for rascality, or just being government, just to answer the name, blow siren up. That's nonsense. That's primitive. That's not something that we should be seeing in this modern age. We should be seeing you commissioning projects that have to do with the lives of the people, that you have improved their lives in terms of transportation, in terms of health facilities, in terms of universities, polytechnic, college education, primary school, secondary. Not that people are learning under conditions that you cannot even put people in primitive societies under such conditions. But you believe that, so you have voluntary transfer. You look at the policy, you like the policy, you now copy it. Because even the capitalism itself, that's why the Chinese will tell you, look, in capitalism, if you want to develop, and this is what they said they will do, and they did it. If you want to develop under this system, you have to steal technology, or you buy technology, or you copy technology. You see, there's nothing like technology transfer. There's nothing like that. What you do is you buy the patent, buy the technology, buy the patent rights, copy it if you can. If you have the capacity, you copy, or you steal it. You steal the technology. We have seen a lot of countries developing based on some of this. So you cannot just continue to think that you can develop under capitalist system using their own morals. You cannot. They have coercive transfer imposed by external actors. Coercive transfer, like SAP, Structural Adjustment Program. We are told. I remember under Babangida's regime, Babangida said there's no alternative to SAP. And Samaluko replied him and told him that there's alternative to SAP because there's no alternative to death, which is living. You are either alive or you're dead. Everything has an alternative. And I think Professor Samaluko was able to shut Babangida down. And then Babangida now said, okay, fine. They will not impose the structural adjustment program wholeheartedly. They will do it in phases. So they started with commercialization before they now moved into privatization. And then gradually they have virtually sold every government-owned enterprise because they cannot manage it, just because of corruption. But if you say there's no alternative to SAP, why would you say that? Because you don't want to kill yourselves. Because you can say for corruption of so magnitude, any Nigerian who goes ahead to steal this kind of amount of money, which he doesn't need, will be executed by foreign court. So you don't need any, which means there's a tolerant level or some tolerant, because when a country is drenched, in corruption like Nigeria, then you must find a way of, getting the people out of that. Since you may not want a drastic solution, because the drastic solution will be you execute any person that is found to have corruptly enriched himself. You just go for execution. They don't want to do that. So you have coercive transfer imposed by external actors, and structural adjustment program is one of it, and several other policies that have been, imposed, virtually on the country. And you have no choice but to adhere to it. They have direct copy, complete replication of a policy. So sometimes you can just copy the policy, copy and paste. We've seen a lot of such policies. They have adapted transfers, modified to suit local context. So you can adapt. So you now make it in such a way that it suits your own local context. And if you're able to do that, then that will be a very good way of actually transferring a policy. So all these four are different ways through which policy transfer can take place, according to Dolowitz and Marsh 2000. The examples are the conditional cash transfer. For instance, conditional cash, it originated in Latin America, Brazil's Bolsa Familia, adapted in countries like Nigeria and Indonesia. So if you look at the conditional cash transfer, universal basic education, it's a VB, influenced by global advocacy, education for all goals. So you find that most of these things were actually copied or adapted or brought into the country. E-governance is government initiative spreading globally as countries modernize their public administration. So now you can do recruitment, you can do transfer, you can do payment, you can do a lot of things using e-governance. You can even send memos from one office to another through e-governance. You don't need to have physical papers on ground. And you find a lot of that, in a lot of government organizations. Government are changing, governance is changing, and people also need to change. Then you have the challenges in policy transfer. Some of the challenges in policy transfer are contextual differences, economic, political, and cultural. And they have institutional capacity limitations. Because sometimes the institutions are limited in terms of their intellectual capacity. Then the risk of inappropriate or superficial adoption. You see, most times, once you lack the discipline, which is very essential for any government to succeed, you must be disciplined. And the discipline must be in you doing what you're actually saying and not saying one thing and doing a different thing. You cannot succeed if that is what you're doing, as an institution or as individuals. And these are some of the problems that we have. We don't have the discipline to sit down and study a policy and look for the required manpower to implement that policy. We don't even have any implementation plan. Usually we don't have implementation plan. Even if we have implementation plan, do we have room for policy monitoring and evaluation so that we can see areas in which the policy is failing and correct it while it is being implemented? We don't normally have such a discipline to get into identifying most of such and this actually affects most of the policies, because there is virtually nothing in this world that you want to do that a policy has not been developed or planned practiced elsewhere around the world. There is no problem that is new. Every problem that we see is either you have refused to solve it, so the problem remains with you. Like the problem of insecurity is not only in Nigeria. Recently, people have been posting the picture of one Latin American country that have been suffering from gang war. And what the president did, arrested virtually all the gang people, put them in prison, and then the society became peaceful. But in this one, that some people may be thinking that even the terrorists are their brothers. How can I say a terrorist is your brother? Or the other day, I saw a member of us representing that Fulani respect cow more than human being. How can I say that? Who were the cows not acquired? Without the Fulani person as a human being, can he rear cattle? Can he be able to go and rear cattle? They say the life of the Fulani man, the cattle is more important to him than his own life. How can I say that? So sometimes we just say all sorts of rubbish in our own society because we think we don't value human life. Human life means nothing to you because you don't know what it means for somebody to be. This breath that will happen every day, in and out, is given to us naturally. Nobody bought his own. Go to the hospital and see how much people are paying for oxygen. And let's see whether any one of us can survive outside this natural gift that God has given to all of us. And therefore, any breathing human being, since you didn't create him, then you must respect his life. Can't just say because he's not practicing what you are practicing, so you kill him. What is the meaning of that? So we'll go back to barbaric, when human beings were living in the state of nature, where there was no law, no life, no society. And which was worst of all is the fear of this fear of attack, that you'll be killed. So if we are now virtually back to the state of nature, even though we're a country, but we're back to the state of nature, where there was no art, no any form of civilization going on. Everything was because people are violent and they're taken to violence. So these are all policy transfer, the challenges that you face for policy transfer, examples of policy transfer that you can have. And basically, these are some of the three discussions or sub-themes we're supposed to have under the impact of globalization on policy making. Now, we should know that the world is a global village and nation states are naked. So no country can say that it is in total control of its own affairs. Apart from North Korea, I'm not sure there's any country again involved that can say and boast that they're in total control of what they do. So I think we'll stop at this point. They say you have questions you want to ask, you have comments you want to make, you can go ahead and make them. If you don't have any question, no comments, then we'll just take a small break of 5 minutes and come, because I've been getting some mails online. So the same handset I'm using that I need to immediately reply to. Maybe next, so I can just take a break for 10 minutes. It's now 5:05. So in 10 minutes time we'll resume and continue. If you don't have any question. Do you have any question? No question. So me, I will go out so that I can. Okay, probably don't need to go out. So I will attempt some question mails.
The magistrate also found that in zero, we have zero, I have zero. They have
All right, so we'll take the next lecture, which is, are we there? Can I hear your voices? Are you still there?
Yes, sir. We're here, sir.
So we're here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So we'll take the next topic, which is on equity and social justice in public policy. Equity and social justice in public policy, and we're covering the sub-themes of distributive justice, affirmative action and inclusive policies, and then gender and policy making. Now, public policy plays a central role in shaping societal outcomes. Whatever outcome we're going to have in terms of whatever changes will take place will largely be influenced by the public policies that have been made and implemented. So public policy plays a central role in shaping societal outcomes, including how resources are allocated, how resources are allocated, how social inclusion is promoted, and how marginalized populations are empowered. Okay, so when you look at equity, it refers to fairness in the distribution of opportunities and resources, while social justice encompasses the broader goal of creating a society in which all individuals can realize their full potentials, regardless of social identity or background. So when you look at public equity and social justice in public policy, basically we will see how our resources, allocated in a way that does it promote social inclusion. Social inclusion, it says that there are several groups that we know, even though there are many, but they are marginalized, like women, like youth, like children, like people with disability. All these groups are, groups that are virtually marginalized. If we go into professions, we also have some professions that are also marginalized, like teachers. Teachers are marginalized within the society because a dictum or some kind of crazy idea came that their reward is heaven. Which of the heavens are they going to that they will get reward? Everything in Nigeria will reduce it to some abstract thinking. Abstract. You just think in the head and then. So we look at the issue of distributive justice. The distributive justice concerns the fair allocation of resources among diverse members of a community. So it is based on normative principles that address who gets what, how, and why. And the theoretical foundations of this distributive justice, you have to look at John Rawls, 1971. He advocated the difference between difference principle, that is in the theory of justice, arguing that inequalities are justifiable only if they benefit the least advantaged. Inequality is beneficial, so to say, or justifiable if the least advantage will benefit from that inequality. Then Jeremy Bentham and then John Stuart Mills looked at utilitarianism. That's the theoretical foundation of this distributive justice. It advocates for policies that maximize overall happiness, often used in cost-benefit analysis, but may overlook equity concerns. When you look at the overall benefit, what policy will you make that maximize overall benefits or happiness, that promotes the happiness of the majority of the people? Then you have also the libertarianism, which is something that was also developed by Nozick. He emphasizes property rights and minimal state interference, often opposing redistributive policies. Then how do you apply this in public policy? Budget allocation. We're talking about distributive justice. You're talking about the fair allocation of resources among diverse members of a community based on normative principles that address who gets what, when, and why. Why are you getting what you're getting? So the application of public policies in budget allocations that prioritize health, education, or infrastructure in undeserved regions. For instance, you look at oil is being produced in Niger Delta. So if we are going to have all the beautiful roads, we are supposed to be seeing them in the Niger Delta. All the beautiful schools, we are supposed to be seeing them in Niger Delta. But is that so in reality? The answer is no. They now become marginalized because they are not, even though they are among the 10 largest tribes, in Nigeria, the Ijaw and all the people that live within the Niger Delta, But they are also seen as minorities and so are marginalized by the three dominant ethnic groups. Even though three dominant ethnic groups, two groups have decided to align among themselves to marginalize a third group. And at all times it will be like that. One of the two of the three will team up to marginalize one. We have seen that in the past and it will continue like that. So today is the Yoruba, Hausa, Fulani and so on that are marginalizing the Igbos and other minority groups in Nigeria. Even though we know that most of these guys are not marginalizing anybody, they are just interested in, just ensuring that funds get into their private pockets. That's all, nothing more. So, because if you look at it, is it that now health facilities in the Yoruba areas or in the Hausa areas are better? The answer is no. The generality of people still suffer the same health disadvantage, including even the rich people that have governed the country, because when they have headache, they cannot go to any health clinic in the country. They have to run away to France, go to Germany, go to Europe to look for health services there. Even though we have some of the best trained, medical personnel, in the world, but unfortunately, they don't have the tools to work. You don't have the state-of-the-art hospitals. Neither do you have educational institutions that you can see that state-of-the-art education. You go to primary schools. I remember that they used to have, during the Buhari's regime, they used to cook meals for them. They say school feeding system, one program they brought. But even in that program, the children were not being properly fed. And then they live in dilapidated classrooms. Then you bring meals to them that are also dilapidated meals. Then the infrastructure in which they are living inside to collect the meals are also dilapidated. So, and this is a story, not just in the Hausa areas, in the Yoruba areas. So the issue has not to do with tribe. It has not to do with religion, but that the elites have teamed up to steal from the people. Simple and straightforward. This because there's not. Don't be calling this in corruption. It's stealing of public money by individuals that have access to government funds. So you apply this in budget, distributive justice. So you try to promote health of the people so that they can go to their farms. They will not be sick. None of this will go to, particularly by taking care of most of the diseases that abound in the environment in which they are living in. So you provide them treatment so that they can be well, they can be sound in health, and then go and work. And then you yourself, you can have peace. Then you have education. You provide them with literacy, because they say if education is expensive, try ignorance. We have seen where ignorance has taken us in Nigeria. We've seen all the bombings, killings, hijacking, all sorts of criminal acts carried out largely by illiterates who don't even know what they're doing. Then we look at the infrastructure. We're supposed to have good infrastructure, virtually over, so that we can, commute from one place to another without any form of fear in our minds. Traveling in China, we are going to we are traveling 1,500 kilometers. Even though that journey we also took train, and then after taking train into one town, we bought buses. Then the buses now delivered us into the town we are going to. We are going from Beijing to Shanghai, and I think we traveled because we were at that time embarking on a study on traditional medicine. So we went to all these places. They were showing us some of their tea industries where they have this green tea, the original green tea that people, because they say what they export out of China is not the original green tea, it's just something they just package and send out. But the original one is what they consume themselves within their own country. So after traveling some 100 kilometers, you have a place that has been arranged for restroom, prepared, thoroughly cleaned, and then you will have filling stations for the vehicles to fuel and all that. Then you now go in there. After some kilometers, you stop. You go to a restroom, you do all the doings you want to do in the restroom, and then you, of course, continue the journey. So the journey will be stress-free. It's not this one when they take you from Lagos. The driver is more interested in passengers he's going to get to go back. So he will drive you until he capsize the vehicle, kill everybody in there, including himself. Then he now deserves some, he will rest permanently. So when you now ensure that these facilities are provided in undeserved areas or regions, not because of what they are contributing, but because you feel that they deserve to have those means of transportation or those means of education or those means of health facilities, then you will say that you are doing distributive justice. Then progressive taxation aimed at wealth redistribution. For instance, you don't keep taxing the poor, rather you tax the rich and distribute the benefits of your taxation to the poor. So you don't need to give them money. It's not always that you think about money. Sometimes you can think about providing them with some basics like good transportation system, good roads, good clinic facilities. You see, and until we do some of the fundamentals ourselves, which we have not been able to do, house numbering and street naming, you find that most of us are just living in anonymous places. You have universal basic services, e.g., healthcare, water, sanitation. You make sure that people have access to healthcare, to water, to sanitation. But you must have, a national register where you have all your over 100,000 communities spread all over the country, 36 states and the FCT. What is the record, national record, in terms of facilities available to these 100 and something communities? Do they have standard? So at the end of the day, you discover that you may need more than all these federal universities that they claim that ASU is complaining that there are too many. You may even discover that they need more than that. Maybe they need to set up a university now in virtually all the 300 and 109 senatorial districts, federal universities, to bring federal university to the doorsteps of the people, because they should also benefit from the resources of the government. Even though some people will be talking about standard and so on, you have NUC should ensure that all of them meet standards. Then you have challenges of this application of public policy, particularly in distributive justice, conflict between efficiency and equity. Sometimes the communities themselves are dispersed in such a way that it doesn't make any economic sense to create and give them facilities. That is why somehow I'm beginning to appreciate what they've done, for instance, here in Uganda. You see that they have some villages, but they make sure close to that village, they are what they call a trade center. Trade center. So in that trade center, virtually everything is available: cement for building houses, iron, roofing sheets, but they are located not far away from the communities, so you can access them, very accessible, not too far. So they have trade centers. So these trade centers, they're like markets. But virtually everything you are supposed to have within a community that you consider to be rural are available in that trade center. So they can easily have access to facilities. And within those, the community where they will put up the trade center, there will be a hospital, which is also close to all the other small communities that are far away. So they can have access to healthcare. And there are schools located within those environments, and there's an administration that ensures that they are monitoring what is going on in virtually all the villages. So they have a very good system, even though a lot of them are complaining of dictatorship. Of course, that is a problem. But even in countries that claim to be democratic, they are gradually sliding into the dictatorship. And that is why our own democracy is being seen to be a hybrid mixture of some elements of democracy, which is just the election that we're holding, which is not even perfect, and authoritarianism that we see in the police, in the army, in the civil defense, everybody who tries to be authoritarian, in Nigeria. Okay. Then you have measurement difficulties will also be there. How do you measure, that actually distributive justice has taken place? Then we look at affirmative action and inclusive policies. Affirmative action. Affirmative action refers to policy interventions that give preferential treatment to historically marginalized groups in areas such as education, employment, and political representation. The objectives of this affirmative action is to rectify past injustices, particularly against women, children, and the youths, promote diversity and representation. And for me, I've been telling women that they should stop wasting their time about this affirmative action and ask for quotas. They should have quota representation. Let them give them quota. Then they can now, if you say you are going to have a quota, because now in the Senate you just have 4 women in about 109 senatorial districts. You can say, okay, fine, we are going to have from each zone, from each geopolitical zone, we have 6 geopolitical zones. From each geopolitical zone, we are going to have three women to represent special interests. Now, the election for those 3 women will be conducted by INEC, but they will use women organizations. Like if you have women journalists, you have women this, you have women, all those organizations. You bring them together, have their own records, get them together, and let them now elect in each geopolitical zone 3 women. In that way, you have increased the number of women because you have reserved quota for them. So you reserve seats for them. You cannot. It's not rocket. These 109 senators are not casted in stone. They can be increased. In all the other chambers in the House of Reps, you can also increase it. And then you can make it mandatory that all deputy governors should be female. And in that way, you at least are able to bring women more into governance. If you go to, I think, Rwanda now, you have, in fact, the women are more in parliament. I think they are more than 60% of the parliament is women. Their own is based on, I think, appointment. And even in Kenya, you have a lot of women, they are appointed by the government. So you have a way of at least promoting inclusiveness. Not that you are discussing women now. Only Natasha, all of them are trying to kill her. They are not even ashamed of themselves. That look, this, even by saying, no, let's give her 6 months, it's even unconstitutional. But they are not even ashamed of what they are doing. And these are matured men that have grandchildren. And then a daughter of theirs. They are now trying to squeeze her to death, even trying to kill her, if it is possible. Example, for instance, we said, you want to rectify and then ensure equal opportunity. You want to ensure equal opportunity. So quota systems in university admissions or political appointment is Nigeria's federal character principle, even though it tries to address that, but it has not completely addressed the issue. I think they need to make more laws to take care of this kind of problem, where you say quotas should be reserved. In the Ugandan parliament, for instance, they have reserved quota for their army. So army members are in the parliament. They have also reserved quota for the workers. So if it was in Nigeria, for instance, they say, okay, you can now, so you have about either 5 or 10 army. I don't know what the number is now. They must have increased it. But we'll look for the figure. Then you have women representative also. Quota reserved for women. Quota reserved for youths. Quota reserved for people with disability. So you can't say you don't like blind men, you don't like lepers, you don't like cripples. They will be in the parliament. So when you are discussing anything that has to do with them, we are going to build a project. They will say this project must take care of access to people with disability. You don't just build a project because everybody is seen or so, or everyone can move. There are people who cannot move, they need to be assisted. So you must create a way for them. So reserve seats for women or minorities in parliament, e.g. Rwanda, India, and even Uganda, they have reserved seats. So reserve seats for them. Inclusive policies. Inclusive policies aim to integrate all groups, regardless of gender, disability, ethnicity, or religion, or socioeconomic status, into mainstream society. You cannot be talking about yourselves alone every now and then, while most of you are not part and parcel of what you're even discussing. So you must make them to be part of your own society. And the only way you can make them to be part of your own society is to ensure that you bring them into mainstream activities. They should be involved in virtually all the activities that you are engaging yourselves in your country without any form of fear. But if you even say more representation should be increased, people would rather be looking at the physically fitted ones. They will not be looking at the disadvantaged groups. You have just 4 senators. They want to kill one so that they will remain 3. So you have 100 and how many? Out of 105 senators are male, only 4 are females. And these adults are shamelessly not willing to even consider and say, look, even though she did is wrong, even though we don't accept this kind of behavior, but please next time, don't do it like that. Then you, Senate President, you want to change somebody's seat, tell the person, I'm changing your seat before you change it. Not that I just take law, you say nobody can talk to you. Then you say, you know me, I can deal with it. Who are you? You are just a senator like every other person. You're elected from it. You are not even elected. You bought that seat because you went to contest president. Primaries for senators already taken place. Somebody won the ticket for that senate seat. You collected it from the person. And then magically now became a senator in a very surprising way. And that's why Rochas Okorocha was so, dumbfounded when he now discovered that some of the people he went to contest primaries with in the Eagle Square are now senators. How did they do it? He himself was shocked that some people were able to get that kind of. So you should be able to understand that you need to allow space for women, allow space for youth, allow space for people with disability, allow space even for the Nigerian army. They should be in the National Assembly. Why are they? You have a defense. Now all this discussion are doing on insecurity. They are not involved. They will only be calling them, come and defend this one. If they are in the parliament, that's inclusion. Nobody should be left out. You want to practice democracy? You should now domesticate that democracy to suit your own local environment. The key elements of this affirmative action include universal design and service delivery into disability access, language inclusion in education and public communication, and then community participation in policy formulation. South Africa's Black Economic Empowerment. And the EFF now, Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa, championed by Julius Malema, the Economic Freedom Fighters Party. They are trying to talk about having the freedom to own their own lands from the whites who own 82% of the land and only left about 18% of the land to the blacks. The reason is that it can lead to perception of reverse discrimination. I say that, for instance, in Rwanda, where you have over 60% of the members of parliament are women, then it means only about 40% will be men. Then now the discrimination will now be reversed against the men. Okay, and so now you have the men are now becoming a minority. Then it may be undermined by corruption or elite capture. Because if you now say quota are reserved, it's possible that it is the elite among these women that will still get elected. But you can also reserve the quota according to profession. So you can say you are reserving from each geopolitical zone, one farmer woman must be produced. And real farmer, not the one that is having a absentee farmer. You have a farm, you recruit to go and farm for you. No. Real farmer. Okay, so apart from that, we'll now talk about gender and policy making, because these are the 3 major areas of our discussion for this second lecture, after which I will try and send you the notes. I've asked that you send me your lists, but I've not seen the list up to now. So I can give you assignments you can do and submit. I hope your class representatives are hearing, so that after the class, you can, the masters and the PhD, I hope you are all hearing. You will send me the list of your own classes. So gender and policy making. Gender sensitive policy making acknowledges the different needs, roles, and experiences of men, women, and non-binarily individuals. The goal is to ensure gender equity through targeted interventions and gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming is a strategy for integrating gender perspectives at all stages of policy processes, including planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. As supervised Aisha Amina Salihu's PhD, she wrote on gender, all these gender issues. And Amina Salihu was virtually saying that in virtually everything, even in subjects, there is discrimination against women. Like history, for instance, why do you call it history? Peace, showing that it's more. So the history is the history of men or what? So they now change, they say it's story, her story. So they now have their own her story. So it's not history, but her story. So the women also are being, so there are gender, sensitive words that we be using. That then chairman. Why do you say chairman? Which means you are saying that the chair must be a man. So now they say to be gender neutral, you now have chairperson. So the chairperson can either be a male or female, doesn't really matter. But you have so that's some kind of gender education that we're trying people to understand that even the use of terms and words have some gender bias against the female. Yeah, even women disease themselves, they call it, they say menstruation. No, now it should be menstruation, not men. Because men are not the ones having the stration or the frustration or whatever it is women. So they should be also having a gender word for that to replace the men. They said every of their problem, men are inside. Men are part of their problem. So your policy areas influenced by gender is health, maternal health care, reproductive rights, whether a woman wants to give birth or not, that should be her own right to take or make, and not that people should just feel that because she's a woman, so she cannot have any choice. I think that is why in America they were virtually promoting what they call abortion rights. That women have the right to decide who comes into the world and who doesn't come into the world. They have education, girl child education campaigns, in Uganda and in Nigeria. In the north, particularly in northern part of Nigeria, in some parts of the south, the girl child hardly finishes primary school. She's married off. Some parents say they cannot see the breasts of their children growing up in their homes, grow up in their husband's home. So they marry them over very tender ages. And that is why in some states, like Katsina, like in Jiga and some other places, you have this issue about these women urinating continuously non-stop because their system has been violated by men. So this becomes a very serious problem. And so there's a campaign to ensure that the girl child at least is allowed to school so that she can be able to, hold offices, not just to be seen as housewives. Because some women now, as what is a profession? I'm a housewife. Although she may be correct in some way because all the services that she's rendering in the house are done on humanitarian grounds, not based on any payment. She gives birth to children, nobody pays her. Now you can see what it costs to give birth to a child, either through this vitro fertility, program, that people, some elites that are able to have children go through, spending millions just to get the child. And then even this alternative, this surrogate motherhood that we find ourselves in now in modern society, our surrogate motherhood, where sperms are donated to a willing volunteer who wants to now give birth on behalf of some husband and wife that feel that they don't want to pass through the pains of carrying a pregnancy, or they're even unable to carry pregnancy. So surrogate motherhood. So their sperms or their eggs are collected and fertilized and put in another person who becomes a surrogate mother. And that is in itself has its own challenges. Then you have labor, equal pay, maternity leave, workplace harassment laws. You find that now this woman was saying that the Senate president harassed her. And this is a married woman that he'll be calling 2 midnight AM in the night to ask her to put her hand in her private part. And how does it sound? Some criminal behaviors. And even now donate, because these are the things that should have been investigated. Donate 500 million this lady for that act, and tell her also that that is money that is supposed to be used to construct road in Abuja, but it has been used to settle her. she should keep quiet, or else she will lose her seat. And we have seen them now really manifesting their threat, into bringing their threat to reality by trying to recall her and immediately to, kickstart a process of ensuring that another election is conducted so that she can be removed, from that office. What are the tools for this, gender mainstreaming or in policy making? You have gender budgeting, allocating public funds based on gender needs, the gender needs. Then says this aggregated data, collection and use of data differential by sex for evidence-based policies. Most times when you are going to the field, you ask a question for someone to tell you what is his sex. Why are you asking him that question? Is it that you are thinking that his sex has an influence over his thinking, or what? And we have an example here of Rwanda has implemented gender quotas in parliament. Currently, over 60% of the MPs are women, which has influenced the passing of gender-sensitive laws. So most of their laws are gender-sensitive. Everything they will do there, they will consider gender. And I think that they are very, considerate, in looking at some of it. The challenges are cultural and religious barriers. So you have cultural and religious barriers. Some religions don't allow for certain equality with women and men. They don't allow for mixture of men and women. And most of these things are recent. Most of these things are recent. Because you will find that, and this is because of the growth of violent religions. Not because both in Islam and Christianity you have some violence going on. Growth of it, using violence. Or at least some people pretending that, they are doing some things, but completely what they want to do is just to get money using those religions. And the only way to get money is to introduce fear. And once you introduce fear, people are afraid. Everything they will do, they look at which of the offenses are they committing. So they can't take independent decisions. Then you have gender stereotypes in leadership. You have also gender. These are some of the challenges. You have a female, heading an organization. Look at what happened to that lady with the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. Before you say Jack Robinson, they have fired her. Meanwhile, there are several male ministers that nobody's even had their name, and they are ministers. Who are they serving, really? But they are there in the government. To finish work and work. He's working, but he's a noisemaker. With some of the ministers, you've never even had their name, and yet they are part of the 48 ministers that we have and advisors. They will be close to 50 something or 68 or so ministers and advisors that are doing nothing. They have tokenistic approaches without real empowerment. Sometimes you may just decide to make you give them, make sure there are more, you populate them everywhere, but you don't give them the power. The power is held by men, because the president of the country will be a man, and they don't even have the courtesy of saying, let's have a vice president that is a female, like they did, for instance, in Tanzania. And now, after the after he was killed, by the Western imperialist powers, then the vice president that took over also continued in the way of the former president, even though not as active as he is, but continue to provide infrastructural development and positive contribution to development in Tanzania. That the country is doing very well. They are making very good progress using a democracy, not a dictatorship like in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. That people will complain that no, people were not chosen. Yes, we know they were not chosen. They brought themselves, but they happen to be, some very good results, or very good results. Particularly, the president of Burkina Faso has taken the lead in changing the landscape and the face of the Burkina. Today, they are very happy with their president. They are not even interested in any democracy any longer. So I think I'll stop at this point. If you have questions you want to ask, you can ask. If there are no questions, then I expect that somebody should tell me when you are sending lists, both for the for the PhD class and the master's class. So I should have your separate list. And then I will set questions for each person, the independent question that every person is going to do. Then you can now forward the questions to my mailbox so that I can grade them and get your continuous assessment. Because I'm sure very soon you will be, yes. So if anybody has any question, I can see me this week. If you have a question, you can go ahead and ask your question. So mute yourself.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Mine is just another view about the quota system you just mentioned.
Yes.
No, with the quota system, sir, I
Yes.
feel it can even eventually reduce the cost of governance, being that the cost of politicking. Sorry, sir. You know, when politicians, one of the barriers for women is finances, but
Yes.
to come out and contest elections. But when
Yeah.
there's that reserved seat, and it will reduce the cost, the money they have to spend before they get to that office. And that is a better opening for women to
Yeah.
be able to contribute in the parliament or in a governance. Because for the past, since democracy started, sir, or that, let me just say that we started with about 6.8% of women representation, but it kept reducing. In 2015, we had 6.3. In 2019, we had 4.5. Today, in 2023, we are having about 4.2. So you can see that it's seriously on the decrease. And I
Yes.
want to deeply appreciate you for viewing the issue of Natasha, sir. With only 4 women and 19 women
Yes.
in the House of Reps, 3 women as senators. You even want to remove one, just like you just rightly mentioned. So that's my other addition, that if we actually get to support this bill that is being sponsored by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Reps, Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu, for that 74 reserved special seat, it will add more voice for women in the parliament. And
Yeah.
the bill has gone through third reading on the 27th of March, because I have been following it very keenly. It went through the third reading on the 27th of March, and I just pray that
Okay.
it sees the light of the day. Thank you, sir.
Okay. The issue of providing quotas for women, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, good. So I think that is a better way for me. This is what some of us have been suggesting long time. That instead of them to be talking about this affirmative act 35%, forget about that one. Let them mention total number of seats they will create. This could be distributed to each geopolitical zone. Each geopolitical zone produces total number of women, and these are the criteria. We must have real farmers among the women. We must have people who are in business. We must have intellectuals among them, so that every group among the women is also represented. And then you can modify the language of discussion in the parliament by saying that some maybe broken English, native language, or and that is why we need to have a national language that everybody can communicate in more freely, the one that is easy for everyone to understand. These things are all going to help us to build a nation. But as it is now, we are not going to move anywhere. And another very dangerous thing that we have been doing to ourselves, even though not completely connected to this, is this issue of opposition politics. That thing is going to kill the country. If we don't find a way of saying that, loose, because what the Chinese did, the Chinese don't have opposition. They have more than 8 political parties, but the major party is the Communist Party of China, the CPC. But the other 8 minor parties or the other political parties have accepted to work with the CPC. And so there's no government business that is done without the inclusion of all the parties. So instead of opposition, they are cooperating. And that is why they are able to get to where they are today in very quick, fast development. Because all the energies that would distract them, because opposition is distracting us. Now look at it in the National Assembly now, they'll be looking at this issue of the Natasha issue. After all, she's an opposition party. And what these people are trying to do is to kill the opposition. They don't want any opposition. And here they will tell you they are Democrats. We are Democrats. We are the ones that fought for democracy. Then why are you afraid of having more other parties? Why are you afraid of them? So I think we can bring the class to an end, because I also have some other engagements to do. But I think the class rep for both